Good evening, everyone. Hello, it's me, Heidi. Welcome to Heidi's Corner. Now, tonight we have a mother of a transgender woman here with me for an interview. Welcome.
Thank
Could
you.
you could you introduce yourself briefly? Tell my viewers who you are and such.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Susanna. As you can see, I am 59 years old. I have two children. I work as a conference interpreter and I am a green activist in my free time. And one of my children is a trans woman, and this is why Heidi asked me to join her in this evening's show.
Thank you very very much. So, as the title description and the description box down below indicates, and you said that one of your two children, is a transgender woman. Now, could you walk us through a bit how all this came about? How all this trans process come about? How your child came out and such?
How she came out. There's a
Yes.
story. Yes. Oh, okay. I'll tell you. Well, she wrote me a letter, and in which she told me about her feelings about her gender, and she posted the letter, and then she kept asking, or weeks went by, and I think she was a little bit nervous, and when I talked to her on the phone, I could sense that there's something bugging her, but I couldn't quite point a finger at what it was. And then maybe even 2 months later, she asked me, "Now, I've written you a letter. Did you receive a letter from me?" I said, "Yeah. I received the medical receipts you were supposed to send me somewhere at the bottom of the pile on my desk." And she says, "Actually, it was a personal letter. If you didn't look at it properly, so could you go back to the bottom of your pile and read it?" And that's how I found out. And she wrote in very clear terms of how she was feeling, and that then he felt that she was rather a young man than a young woman. That's how I found out. And so we were not physically in the same place at the time, so we did talk on the phone, but this message was so important that I think she wanted to write me a letter and explain. And what happened afterwards was that I was obviously a little bit baffled, which is I hear from other parents of transgender children or young adults, that quite often their first reaction is kind of astonishment. You can't figure out what, even if you're aware of such a thing existing, you can't possibly understand that this concerns my child, whom I've learned to know as a female, or male in this case, male. So that was the beginning, and then because I was baffled, and I thought, that I knew about transgender issues, but there was a compartmentalization which prevented me from seeing something that was too close to close to me. And of course, I had this gender issue and my child. It was not that far-fetched when I thought about it more. But then, with the help of a wonderful peer support group, I managed to collect my thoughts and get to grips with what was going on. And it was great to hear from what other parents had to say, and others whose process was already very advanced. And so I received the letter, and a year after my receiving that letter, which was in 2012, I think, I then had a child who had a different name. So she changed her name officially in the population register, and she was able to have an identity card, a passport, which had a woman's name, and but the box for gender was ticked for male. And for me, that was actually in this process one of the difficult parts, because I knew how difficult that was for her. So she travels, and she has a woman's name, and if the passport control person looks more closely, they see that he is somebody going by a woman's name, and yet they have a male tick there for their gender. But then this was sorted again a year later, and I had a daughter who was officially a daughter and had a girl's name. And actually, the naming, actually, this is something parents talk to each other about, how their child picks a name when they want to change gender. And in my case, I was very fortunate I said, I have given you a name once, and I would very much like to be part of naming you again, if you allow. And I was allowed to have a say in what she was called. So I really appreciated that. And then, well, in such a process, which is a long process, gender reassignment, there are all kinds of stages for the parent and stages for the child. And I think for a parent, what you live through is a kind of you think through, and you kind of you don't make a new history for yourself and your family and your child, but then you kind of think of your child of when they were 1 year old or when they were first born. I hardly remember that I gave birth to a biological boy, because I always think of the time when my daughter was born. Which ties in with something.
So kind of going with just going a bit with that direction there. Not kind of being thinking of it as having given birth to a biologically male child. In hindsight, do you somehow see in hindsight that there were quote unquote signs of it prior to this letter?
Yes,
like tiny hints of such.
Yes, definitely.
Could you
Actually,
go could you walk us through that path of things?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, um, my children were not brought up wearing clothes, for instance, which are like typically typical boys' clothes or girls' clothes. So it was not like pink for girl and blue for boy. So and I never forced either of them into a stiff and rigid gender role, which might be why there might have been a clash earlier if that had been the case. But I do remember thinking on some occasions that there was something about her gestures, her way of being that made me think that actually she was stretching. She doing yoga or stretching in front in the on the living room floor in front of the fireplace, and I looked at her and I think, you know, he could be a woman. That kind of something about her where I always thought my children were very beautiful, but then I saw some kind of feminine beauty in the movement. Also, there was a weird thing that happened when she was a young adult. I told somebody that I feel that my relationship with uh, my son is like what I imagine there to be between mother and daughter, more than mother and son. I remember saying that, and it came back to me.
Years later, then on
Yeah,
when
exactly.
when you read the letter, right? Then that was kind of the memory lane we had there. Could you then walk us? And you mentioned the process of getting the ID and passport with the correct name, and then the correct gender marker. And then could you walk us from perhaps getting the gender marker fixed in the census system, and so could you walk us through from there?
The
You know how it was, how
oh yeah,
how
I can
that
say.
the process from there on, from a
Oh yeah,
mother's
yeah.
point of view, all the
Mhm.
all the seeing your daughter go, all the hassle,
Well,
and as a mother, you know, growing into being, growing from being a mother of two boys to being mother of one girl and one boy. How did your own growth as a parent?
my own growth as a parent.
Because I guess there must have been before and after in this regard.
Yes, of course, there was a before and after. Mm, and the steps that led to the after.
Yes.
Um, like I said, I when I first found out, I was a little bit, and not a little bit, confused. Um, at one of the peer support groups, there was this guy who whose kid had been in the process for years already, and he said, don't worry. at first it feels like someone put a paper bag on your head and you can't see anything, you can't hear anything, you're just in some kind of, and you can't see the way forward. You can't see the way forward. You can't see the past any longer. So, and the guy said, that's for a couple of weeks, it's like that. And then it starts, the way opens toward the future. And this was a good description. Something like that happened to me, because I think every parent, when when we let me start again and specify, because there are small children who at the age of 2 or 3 or a little bit later, usually they very clearly indicate that their birth gender is not right, and reassignment is necessary. So
Yes.
they grew up from a very early age, and our societies today mostly allow that. Our enlightened, progressive societies allow that a child can be have be a biological male and be called something female, and then they grow up and they go to school and the teacher accepts that and they're called what they want to be called. But in many cases still, and earlier this was even more the case, that at an age which is difficult for many people, when you're a teenager growing up and finding your sexuality and finding the kind of gender role you might want to endorse or not. You come from living and having been seen by everyone else as male or female, and then suddenly you can't live with that any longer. So it's very difficult, and it's a different situation altogether when you have this young adult, or even somebody who's in their 20s, even late 20s, because we know that these processes start at very different ages. Even in places where there is awareness of transgender issues, not everyone becomes aware of it at the same time. So that's what I wanted to say. So it's not the same for a parent of a small child. Small children's parents have to stand by their children. They have to fight for, in some cases, at school, for them to be called by their real name, and these gendered toilets, etc. But the before and after.
Yes.
That was what
After.
the before and after. Before, I think after is a lot better. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Since
I would assume so.
after is where we want to be, because there is something before my daughter was able to tell me about these about her feelings. I think there had been years of uncertainty, and she had been really, really trying to live as a man. It didn't work out. It was not for her. And it's quite often the case that I've heard this from other trans parents, if I can say that young adults completely push and overdo and try to really, make a final push at being super masculine or super feminine before they say, okay, I tried, I really did try, and this is not for me. I want something else. So now for us in my family, where we are now is good. And the way we got there was not always easy. In the very beginning of my daughter's process, actually, I set an objective for myself, which was, if I have to, choose from different approaches, I'll choose the approach which does not break the bond between me and my child. So I support her, and because every parent and child relationship can be difficult at times, and when the kid's really irritating, if the objective is to keep the relationship going, you make different choices from whether you wanted to choose a different approach. I know some parents wanted to choose a different approach and challenge their child more. Are you for real? Is this for real? Why is this happening? Are you maybe, are you ill?
Is it perhaps some sort of bargaining? Bargaining, can this really be? Are you sure? This, some sort of bargaining in if you sometimes if you lose someone you love, perhaps there's someone passes away, and you start the sort of a process of grieving, sort of. You lost some. Yeah, a parent of a transgender person, sort of. Someone said you lose one child and welcome another, like say goodbye to a son and welcome a daughter into your life. Would it be, and then in this process, sort of bargaining process, in the grieving process, grieving for the son, some sort of bargaining process? Would it be something along those lines?
It could be. It could be. A couple of days ago, I talked to a parent of transgender, a child younger than mine, and I asked her, "What would you?" I'm going to be interviewed for this YouTube show. What do you think is an important? Tell me one important thing that you'd like me to say. I can say it. And actually, what she said was something I had already thought of, which is the following. And if any parent is listening to us now, or finds this video in YouTube in the future, you might feel that you lose your child, or that you are attached, the image of a son or daughter that you're attached to somehow disappears. And but she said to me, I want to say that the person is the same. You don't lose your child. the person is the same, even though they might look different. And this is my experience, and this is what I wanted to say, actually, because my daughter's,
Excuse me.
yeah,
We're having a bit of a lag from you, slight lag from you,
uh-huh,
from your end to mine.
okay,
So okay, just so you're aware of it. Keep going.
okay,
I'll
sure,
interrupt if I'll interrupt if it gets worse.
all
Please
right.
please carry on.
Okay, I'm on
Pick
Wi-Fi.
on
I
where
think
you
I'm on the
yeah
Ethernet.
pick up from where you left off.
Okay, I was, yes. So this parent said, and I agree, that you most certainly do not lose anyone. Your beloved child just changing its appearance. And I guess it's sometimes with young people, before gender reassignment or before they come out, they might try some extreme expressions of gender, which it's all part of the process. They might go from growing a beard to wearing a miniskirt and high heels in a very short period of time. And that can be difficult to understand. And I think it's also our culture is rather over sexualized in that gender identities and expressing gender very visibly is trendy. So it's usually, um, all these girls wear pink and boys wear blue. It's very very common nowadays. I was made to think about this when I saw just recently a photo of from a fashion catalogue or some such thing, where children are between maybe ages 3 and maybe 10, 11, were photographed in fashionable clothes. This was maybe, was it 1971 or something like that? And those children's hairdos and the clothes did not reveal their gender at all, actually, because they were wearing bright yellow. They were wearing, a boy was wearing green and a girl was wearing orange. And they were shortish, longish hair, irrespective of gender, which is a very, very, very different place from where we are now, where even in clothing, clothes advertising, you see kind of male and female roles very clearly in the photo. So a girl has to choose whether they are this young man or this pretty girl. There's no um, nothing in between. And of course, we are now talking in binary terms, which I want to point out. We're talking in binary terms, but there's a whole spectrum of diversity.
Which is kind of interesting anyway. This whole we could we could go down the rabbit hole of the issue of talking in binary, but perhaps we in this context we shouldn't go down that rabbit hole because it's not really relevant right 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 in this interview.
Mm.
So uh, how do you think this um, transition affected, if you can call it that, the family dynamics when after this letter. It must have affect. What's your take on the effect of the transition on the family dynamics in as a whole?
Well, I'm trying to think in terms of gender roles and family
No, I mean
dynamics.
how.
I didn't
Yeah.
have, if I had
Yes.
had a young handyman, and if I had then wanted this young handyman to turn into a young person who irons my aprons, then maybe that could have been a problem. Now, a big change in a family probably has an impact, always has an impact on the family dynamics. Well, the background in this case was that I was no longer hadn't been married to my daughter's dad for a very long time. So if that's what you're referring to,
Yes, and
we
the extended
were
family.
not living together, so there was nothing to agree on or disagree on in the home in our daily lives. But of course, if you mean the different approaches different family members had and how that all that went. I don't want to make a secret of it, but my daughter's father didn't take it very well at all, unfortunately. And what I hear from at that point in time, and times evolve, fathers had problems with the transition process more often than moms. I don't know why. Well, after all, there are more transitions from female to male than male to female, actually. I don't know whether that has to do with it. And of course, well, when my daughter
Excuse me,
transitioned,
I must take a question from right now from
yeah,
Susan.
sure.
Forgive me if already addressed and missed it, but does birth certificate remain birth gender? We don't have birth
Can I
certificates in
explain?
Finland.
Yeah.
We don't
Yes,
have those birth certificates in Finland. We have uh, the census system, which updates pretty much bang on real time. When I it it as far as I can tell, the census system has basically no trace of
yeah.
me prior.
In
There is no trace, pretty much no trace of me prior. There's just the date of birth, parents, the birth parents, and that's it.
I think in those countries where there is a central population register, it's true that the actual document of birth certificate as a piece of paper which has some validity does not exist. It's the Nordic countries, also Germany, as far as I know. That's
And Estonia, I think, and such.
that's the case. Yeah, but
Okay, yeah, I just had to address that immediately before it's
yeah.
lost in time. Okay, so anyway, the family dynamics.
Yeah,
As
family
far as
dynamics.
the yes, as far as when it comes to your to ex-husband and the father,
Yeah, well, that I think I we don't need to go there any more than that. And
No, that's that. Yeah, because that I don't think that's relevant really in this context.
yeah,
Uh, but then
my
going, oh,
the
yes,
grandparents maybe.
yeah, I was about to go into that and extend this to the extended family, grandparents, brother, uh, and so.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that? On as to how it all went down from say
Mhm.
your perspective and how they were told and such.
Yes. Well, there too, I think. Mm, the well, I can only talk about my own parents, those grandparents. That it went well. They loved my daughter. My father unfortunately passed away some years ago, but they had always been extremely close, and that close relationship remained quite simply. Um, and well, my dad was he was not in a brilliant shape. He had had a stroke, and he had a slight difficulty in expressing himself a little bit, but he did not disapprove. That's certain. And my mum certainly understood very well, and actually, yeah, that was relative. That was pain free, actually. And I want to say as well that for me it was a surprise to see how well that some friends of my parents' generation, so people who are now in their 80s, late 70s, 80s, um, were able to accept something which I thought was something rather rare, and it was not written about in the papers as much as it might be now. Um, but actually, I discovered that I'm thinking of an elderly lady who was who might a friend of the family from since I was a child. I told her, and she said, "Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I know. Yeah, I have a friend of mine has a, has um, has a son or daughter. I don't remember which, who's now in their 50s, and yeah, and they're transgender." I said, "Okay, all right. So you know about this." So we must not underestimate the older generations. And of course, there are unfortunate cases where this does not happen. And I was going to say, actually, if I may, Lady,
Yes,
that
of course.
that
Go
my
on.
yes, you. I mean, I understand you want to know about stuff which is kind of valid today, and I
Yes.
have to say that this our society, the way it is now, where gender and identity have become much more visible, and they are chips in some even very ugly fights. This was not the case when my daughter's transition started. Nobody said to me that, okay, so is your are you, I don't know, are you communist or are you um, lefty anarchists because you want because or do you want everybody to be gender neutral? Gender neutral is a funny word.
Yes.
So it's a very funny word. So in a way, for my family, the transition happened at a good time. There was no talk about it being a value uh, choice that you are transgender, and that it was, that it was not politicized the way it is, at least in many countries now.
Yes.
So, or in we have awful Poland. We have examples from all kinds of awful examples from the US, etc., etc. So politicizing gender in that way hadn't it was ongoing and hadn't happened yet. So we were not commies. We were not ill.
Okay, and before we went on in the green room, went we went briefly through the question of, has this whole transition made you question or rethink your own gender in any way, shape or form? Has it changed your view on your own gender? Has it made you think it through again, or maybe for the first maybe for the
Or
first time
gender
ever
in
actually
or
think it
yeah.
through?
Or do you mean like gender in gender issues in general and my personal feeling
Your
about gender,
both
or both?
both.
Um, well, that gender is a social construct
Yes.
was something I was aware of, or that was very much part of my thinking as a feminist, even, or and someone very much into social sciences, even before. But of course, one is compartmentalized. So when the case of my daughter, uh, it was kind of different. So it's always difficult to apply what you know to what happens to yourself. Um, and if I think about myself and gender, um, I think I was fortunate to grow up in that era I mentioned, where I could wear green and yellow instead of pink. Um, when I was growing up, and play with boys if I wanted to, or girls if I preferred, or both. Um, I even though I do remember thinking when I realized that my body started changing, and I was thinking that, yeah, these breasts, okay, so will they be really big, and will they prevent me from running around and climbing trees, or doing something that I wanted to do? And I think I even had a chat with someone, an adult. It could have been my mom, it could be someone else, but I was kind of reassured that these changes, they're fine, and you can do what you've been doing, and life will continue. Um, I would say that gender expression for me has been kind of, in the case of women, it's quite normal that you can sometimes wear a suit and flats, and sometimes if you feel like it, you can wear a dress and heels. So that there's much more uh, room for gender expression still today for women. So anything goes, kind of. So I never kind of yes, I am a woman. I have lived as a woman. I don't think I'm going to change that in the near future. But I also understand where that body dysphoria comes from. I think that it must be a nagging feeling that you have something there which you don't really want to live with.
Yeah. And how do you maybe a little bit extending on this whole gender as a social construct when when it attach when in this setting,
Mm.
as well as maybe that combined with biological sex. But how do you view in the past the your child had what could be perhaps relationships in past and present, like relationships that could be considered straight in the past but now could be considered lesbian. How do you kind of feel about this change, if there's been you know
Yeah,
the how society views your daughter's
yeah,
relationships?
yeah. That I think that's a very good question because that's what many parents actually think about this issue. Their transgender kid, so and they even they ask whether what's going to happen now. So if my son was straight, so they were dating girls, and then they become a girl, and will they remain straight and then start dating boys? So how's this going to happen? And of course, on uh, the actual case being that we don't know, and both happen actually.
Yeah, both do
But
happen.
both do happen. So you don't really know. Um, but for me, um, my daughter being gay was not an issue. No, no, not at all.
So, with regards to that, there wasn't much change really. Of course, there was the the physical transition, but not really the shift
Mm,
in. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and
Mm.
yeah, and
Go
and
on.
of course, what I actually like to say, if somebody listens to this and they have a transgender child, they might be wondering how all this relationships, business, and all that will uh, happen and proceed, and what's going to happen in the future. Uh, because many of them are worried that their child will end up being alone. They're not going to find anyone because they are in a niche situation. That how can they find someone, and how will they find love? How can they start a family, etc. That's something parents worry about. Um, and well, I'd like to say from my own experience that my daughter's life and other stories from other trans kids' parents is that Um, I've heard such wonderful, wonderful stories of how everything when you come out as trans, how suddenly it's all better. Obviously, some people's lives are difficult, but that there is a whole relationship market out there, which is for trans people, as well as straight and gay and all the other versions of human gender expression and sexual orientation.
Indeed, indeed. Now, I it was a while ago that I asked our audience to give questions for me to ask our
Mm-hmm.
guest, but
Sure.
we've had only so far we've had only one,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we've been babbling on with this interview for 52 minutes, which is quite a nice length for an interview. Uh, for those watching, most probably do not know that my guest tonight is my mom, and the trans daughter is me. So this is kind of the big identity reveal. Anyway, I thought I'd reveal this because we have a question that wouldn't make any sense, none whatsoever, if this fact wasn't revealed. It comes from Maria Ylänkö. Is there anything that has changed in the way you and I engage with each other compared to the time before the reassignment?
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on this, mom?
Uh, well, if you have a relationship with someone, anyone, and you have a big secret that you're not revealing, that's going to have an impact.
Of course.
So in a way, so the time before you came out, I knew that there was something, and I couldn't figure out what that was. And I remember asking a couple of times, "Is there something that you need to tell me? Some, you know?" And you said, yeah, well, last week was a little bit, it's not such a great week or something. Uh, and then when I received the famous letter, the penny dropped. So in that respect, yes, the elephant in the room was identified and removed.
Yeah, there it was. Boom.
Mm. And of
Yeah.
course all these the steps then that um, change of name, change of legal gender, because of course for anyone not so familiar with the terminology, the legal change of gender does not produce any physical consequences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a fact.
Yeah,
So and
it's
so
just
so
different.
so there were all these steps, and so once, but for me the most difficult period was the person traveling with the a female name and male ticked in the box, because that was very stressful. And at the time, you traveled quite a lot.
Yeah, that was quite a bit of traveling, and that that was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, exactly. But here we are.
Yeah,
Here we are,
well,
and
and alive after the traveling with a weird passport and ID.
yes, yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
now I think it's time for us to love you and leave you. Now there are links in the description box below, links to two Discord servers and such. So please go check it out. And before we say goodbye, please like and subscribe. Bye.
Bye bye.